Hey everybody, so we're 3 minutes late because we were actually going to do this on the deck, and I was saying this morning that the tornado and the rains were supposed to come this morning, and they promised again this evening, and this morning the sun was shining, and I was like, we're not going to get anything this evening either, and then just momentarily ago it started looking pretty ominous outside. So we're indoors, and it doesn't matter what we have to do, it's going to get done. So, two things to celebrate today. We're finally getting to the end of chapter 1. For those of you who have been following me all along, I've been moving kind of slow here through the Gospel of Mark, which teaches us how to be more Christ-like, learning to discipline ourselves towards godliness. And so today, very exciting, last passage in the first chapter, and we've seen where Jesus had healed publicly in the synagogue, then he healed privately in Peter's mom's house. In the synagogue, you had the demon-possessed man. Peter's mother had the fever, and then after that spread about the demon-possessed man being healed, then it says that everyone brought their sick ones to him. And so now, Jesus is starting his whole ministry circuit, sort of preaching, teaching thing, and he went off to pray. We talked about that the last time, and he was disturbed by the disciples saying, come, 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 everybody's looking for you. And he says, no, let us go to the other villages. And so, interesting enough, Mark focuses on a couple of things in this passage, but this particular miracle, the cleansing of the leper, is mentioned in all the synoptic gospels. Matthew, Mark, and Luke record the story, and Matthew pretty much places the emphasis on this healing or this miracle taking place immediately after the Sermon on the Mount. And he talks about how the leper worshipped the Lord. And Luke, the physician, talks about the fact that it took place, but more about the level of leprosy that the individual had from a physician's standpoint. But Mark just focuses on what we're going to talk about today, which teaches you and I how this is applicable to our lives today, and how when we do this, we're being more Christ-like. And so let's read the passage, and then I want to merge it together with watermelon detoxing today. But you'll see how that kind of combines itself into it, or merges itself into it in a moment. Jesus cleanses a leper, and I'm reading from Mark 1, verses 40 through 45, which are going to take us to the end of chapter 1. Next week we will start on chapter 2, and that's when Jesus is going to be healing the paralytic. Now a leper came to him, imploring him, kneeling down to him and saying to him, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." That's very important. I don't want to repeat it just yet, but remember, keep that in the back of your head. Then Jesus, moved with compassion, stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, I am willing, be cleansed." As soon as he had spoken, immediately the leprosy left him, and he was cleansed. And he strictly warned him and sent him away at once and said to him, "See that you say nothing to anyone, but go your way. Show yourself to the priest and offer for the cleansing those things which Moses commanded as a testimony to them." However, he went out and began to proclaim it freely and to spread the matter, so that Jesus could no longer openly enter the city, but was outside in deserted places, and they came to him from every direction. There's a lot going on here, and all of the other gospels focus a lot on a lot that's going on here. But Mark starts with, now a leper came to him, imploring him, kneeling down to him and saying to him, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." Now, this is a great Bible study verse here, because we would be comparing it to the other gospels and what the emphasis is in the other gospels. And primarily Matthew stresses the fact that he did not say, "If you are willing," he says, "If you, Lord, are willing." So he gives him a little more reference, and then there's the whole worshiping piece. But Mark wants us to make the distinction clearly that if you are willing, meaning that he's expressing once again the divinity of God, our Lord. Yes, he came fully man, but also fully God. So he has the compassion of a man, a human being in the flesh, but at the same time, he is putting God, the Lord, Jesus Christ, on the same level as God the Father that can do anything and everything. So does Jesus have the power. In other words, it's not saying the leper came to him imploring him, please have your Father heal me, or please by the grace of God the Father heal me. But he's saying, if you Christ are willing. Now we need to talk about this whole thing, because it's important why he's saying, if you have the power to actually heal me of something that basically is incurable. Now, we have today where you can take multitudes of tests and determine what's going on with you. You know, someone, one of my partners was coughing a little the other day, and he was like, well, I'm going to go home because I don't want to spread COVID. So in this season that we're in, anything that looks like a cough or a chest pain or anything, immediately there's the suspect that you have COVID. But you could readily go and at least get a test to determine if you're COVID positive at that particular time. So in these primitive times, what was leprosy? Leprosy obviously was this thing that took over your skin. But there were two distinct types of leprosy: nodular leprosy and atesthetic leprosy. The first kind of grew in the nooks and crannies, you know, the crevices of the bodies, in here, in the cheek lines. So it took over the face. It's a disease that, if you had that form of it, basically lasted for about 9 years. And what lasted for 9 years, just like the slow death or the fast death, depending on how you compare it to the second type of leprosy, which typically lasted for 20 to 30 years, and the body just slowly decayed, because the second form of leprosy also took over the nervous system, where this one was pretty much subject to the skin level in and of itself, where it just got to a point where it was just so much that it basically distorted the human face, the figure, you could know, even the hands and everything. But with the second level, slowly but surely, your hands begin to become claws, finger by finger fell off, and then the whole hand fell off, toe by toe fell off, and then the whole foot fell off. And I'm going through this because imagine that. Imagine you being diagnosed with leprosy, and someone tells you that, and you're in a time where there's nothing else you can do. So in addition to the fact that you're slowly but surely deteriorating physically, spiritually, emotionally, because you become an outcast once you're determined that you have leprosy. And how was that determined? With anything that looked like it was something on the skin. So it could have been psoriasis, it could have been acne, it could have been anything. You were immediately labeled as a leper. And there was a ceremony that took place where the priests would march you into the church, and they would literally perform a ceremony that would basically have you be pronounced as a dead person. But you weren't quite dead. You were still alive, but technically, in all matter of fact, you were the living dead. And so that kind of put that title and that label on you. Subsequently, you could no longer enter into the synagogue to worship publicly. They had slots outside of the building of the temple so that you could peer from the outside to be a part of the service, but you couldn't come in. And then when you would come around people, not that they didn't already know, because you would have to have your head shaven, and after, depending on how long you had it, and shortly within the first few years, the deformity took place, so most people would recognize that. But initially that wasn't taking place, and so that's why they had to have the ceremony to pronounce you the living dead, and you had to shout unclean, unclean when you came into public places, so that people would know that you were a leper, you were unclean, because at that time it was like a mold or a mildew, something that if I touched you, it became infectious, though it wasn't infectious, and it was just an awful way to live. And so keep this in mind. And so when you go back to the Gospel of Luke, when you have time to read the version of these two miracles in all three Gospels, Luke says that the man that had a high level or an overgrowth of leprosy. I don't feel like looking through Luke right now, but he really puts the adjectives in there when he describes this, whereas Mark says a leper came to Jesus. Luke goes on to definitively say that the person that was a leper had been obviously in the advanced stages. And so all of this is important because it's trying to get you into the mindset of the leper. And so at that time, leprosy, amongst other diseases, but definitely leprosy, was associated with that sin disease. And so just as you think that, people do things wrong and they just think that that's the end of life and there's no forgiveness for it and there's no grace and there's no mercy for it. And so here you have this supposedly incurable disease where there's just an association with sin and there's no grace and there's no mercy for the individual that has it because you become an outcast, which is why it was interesting as Jesus finished the Sermon off the Mount, as they were coming down off of the mountain and back into Galilee, the leper comes from behind as sort to, set the stage that, when you get to that level, you live in deserted places. You live as an outcast. And so he comes and he kneels down. Mark stresses kneels. Matthew says worships. Luke says that he was prostrate. And all of them are trying to give us the scenario that he came, one, in humility, and two, in complete reverence to the Lord. He knew that he was the Lord God divine, because he says, if you are willing, and that shows you another level of humility, because sometimes, especially us as followers and Christians, we believe, yes, we are the co-heirs of Jesus Christ, but sometimes we just think that we're entitled to no suffering. We're entitled to nothing going wrong in our life. Patience as a virtue doesn't apply to us because we're the children of God and we're supposed to have it like everything else in this microwave society. And that's not the case. And in his humility, it's almost like the Hebrew boys in the furnace. I know that you can, but even if you don't, we know that you can, and so I love that piece of it where it's like, if you're willing. If you're willing also implies that I know you can do this, God, but I want it if you want it. So there we have Jesus in the garden saying, not my will, but your will be done. Take this cup from me, but not my will, your will. So this is kind of like the same thing. It's like, I know you're able to, and if you're willing, if it's a part of your will for me to be well of this leprosy, Lord, then heal me. If not, it's okay. That's what I'm gathering from this, and that's what makes this so beautiful, and that's what makes it the session for today. Just that small piece is that no matter what we've done in life and no matter where we are in life, we can come to our Lord Jesus Christ, who is able to change our situation, and glory be to God. He has walked upon the earth so that as a man in flesh, he can fully relate to every situation that we're going through. And no matter what we're going through, no matter what we individually, we globally, pandemic, whatever we're going through, we have to accept that our time is God's time. And whatever we're going through, it has to be okay with us, ultimately. And so that's another sermon, another thing, but just having that kind of mindset to put yourself in a situation where a person is just horrible, that just everything about life sucks to the nth degree. And yet he doesn't come with an attitude. He doesn't come with a sense of privilege or I this belongs to me, or I ought to be well, or why is this happening to me instead of the other people? Why did it, it doesn't come with that. It just comes with the acknowledgement of the Lord being the divine Lord, to the humility. If you want to do this, if you're willing to do this, I would be most grateful. I would be appreciative. If not, I'm going to continue in this space that I'm in, and probably recognizing that as horrible as this space that I am in is, I have been surviving for all of this time. It had to have been a matter of time that he had been diagnosed as or sought as a leper, because Luke calls it out that he was in an extreme condition of leprosy. And so he's been dealing with this, and though it's a horrible place to be, it's the difference between not being. You know, it's the difference between taking your own life. So it's like hanging in there anyway. And if it's your will to do this thing and make this thing be gone, and the attitude that he comes with, the confidence and the assurance that not only can God heal him, but he can do it just like that. He wasn't saying, you know, in an attitude or manner that, okay, if you're going to do this, then there's going to be a plan to do this. You know, then maybe I'll go through the ceremonial rituals that the priest has for me or whatever. No, he's like, if you want to do this, you probably can do this right now. It can be over, and that could be a good thing. And that is how we ought to come in our kneeling. When we kneel, this guy came down and worshiped God, kneeled before our Lord. And so when we're in prayer, we ought to be coming with a level of confidence and assurance that that thing that I am praying for, you can do. And so the question becomes, is it a part of your will for it to be done? It's not whether or not I'm going to answer your prayers. Prayers are always answered, but they're answered, and everything that we ask for is given to us when it's in the will of God. And at some point, that has to become peaceful and in balance with us. And so Jesus goes and he touches the man. So he's going against, you know, Jesus and everything that he came with, all the stuff that was going on with the Pharisees, he always kept in line those things that were established by the early scriptures. So in the Levitical law and everything that was written about leprosy and everything, Jesus touched the man. Did he violate the law? Did he go against the laws that were put in place by the scripture? No, because Jesus was able to heal the man. Believe that when the man asked him, if you can do this, will you do this? Jesus had already done it. And so the healing had already taken place. And so now he touches the man who has already been cleansed as far as he's concerned. He touches the man, and then he tells the man, don't go and tell anybody about this, but also go to the priest so the priest can declare you clean. I don't know why that's in there. You can read a million commentaries, and people have a million different views about why exactly that's in there. Is it in there because maybe the man wouldn't have gotten to the priest before some of the hypocrites in the crowd got to the priest, and they would have been able to prejudice the priest and wouldn't have let it been done because it was supposedly or said or seen done by Jesus? Could it have been for the simple fact that once this word gets out, it's going to be difficult for Jesus to walk among the places where most people are inhabiting the space. And unfortunately, he would be out in the deserted places, but it didn't matter, because in the last verse here, it says that people brought people to him in the deserted places that he was in, because once this man went and proclaimed what he proclaimed, then everybody wanted a piece of him. But also notice that Jesus wants the man to be in conformance with the laws that are in place by the standard. Now, these laws are not laws of option, whether or not you want to be vaccinated. These are laws that are mandated, that when you have leprosy, you have to come and present yourself before the priest. You have to do the whole ceremonial, sacrificial giving of the 2 birds and some meal and a couple of other things that are outlined in a few of the other Gospels. And so that's the most important thing that I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about the fact that Jesus also met the man where he was. You know, sometimes when people are ill, you know, whether it's mentally ill, whether it's just emotionally mean people or whatever, you know, Jesus met him where he was. He didn't wait to heal him or for him to become this or that. The man had no right, I guess, coming to him in that particular condition, because he was unclean. He wasn't even supposed to speak to people in public like that, but he did, and Jesus didn't like hit him over the head because you're doing the wrong thing. He just, you know, he extended his hand right out to him and told him, began to have a conversation with him about what he needed to do from that point on. So that's a beautiful passage. We need to pay attention to it. We need to pay attention to those critical points being in humility. We worship God. We come to God. Yes, come. He says, ask and it will be given to you. But we still come in a level of humility and reverence and confidence and assurance that God can and He will and He's able, but we have to get to a place where we belong to Him. We have been redeemed. We are His property. We are here to serve Him, that He may be glorified. And whatever that looks like in our life, whatever time we're going through, our happy times, our sorrowful times, times like now where people think everything is upside down. Everything is upside down, but guess what? God is still on the throne. And when we keep and maintain that attitude, then things get to be as beautiful as these flowers. You know, it's how you view things in life. And so leprosy was that thing that would take over the skin. It could be just acne or something like that, and no one was able to differentiate that between leprosy at the initial stages. So you were, deemed a leper, and once you're treated the way lepers were treated, then even if you just had acne, it probably would, grow to be something far worse, just because of what it does to you spiritually and emotionally. So we have people today that have acne. We have people that have all kinds of things. Your grandparents always taught you that you could tell how healthy a person is by looking at their skin and their eyes. I believe that that's very true from various points of reference, but more importantly, from the main point that our skin is our largest elimination channel. So we have 5 elimination channels. We don't know if we've gone through that yet, but we will one day. So the 5 elimination channels: the skin, the kidneys, the colon, the skin, the liver, and the lungs. And so the skin is the largest elimination channel, but also it's a two-way membrane. And understanding that it's a two-way membrane, you go into environments, so whether you have just a mask on or your skin is exposed, if it's functioning the way that it ought to be functioning, then it's like a sponge and it's absorbing. But it also has the ability to purge out. And so when we start talking about detoxing and cleansing the system, we've got to start with the center. And we want to purge as many impurities as we can. And we won't want to try and oversimplify it, but we don't want to make it complicated. So people start saying, I need to do a detox, and this is wrong or that's wrong. We just start with the basics. It's the plumbing in the house. So it may be a result of something bad in the laundry room. It could be some feminine products in the bathroom on that side. It could be too much grease in the kitchen sink. It could be a plethora of things. However, we just need the pipes to be working. And so the best way to start to get them to work, anybody that comes in, what are you going to do? You're going to snake it out. So you want to go in and start pulling out the bad stuff and allowing the water to freely flow the way that it ought to. So we want to do the same thing with the body. We want to start purging out acid deposits of calcium, things that shouldn't be consumed through the human body, processed foods, foods that just stay in the system for too many hours, beyond 16 to 17 hours, which open up a breeding ground for parasites. Then you start to have calcification, start to have fermented matter, so you get deposits of all sorts in the system. So what we want to do is flush that out. And the quickest, easiest, simplest, most economical way, which just happens to also be just miraculous. And I that's why we are doing this today. I think I've done the watermelon thing for you guys a couple of other times on our YouTube channel. It's probably at least 2 other videos on what to do with the watermelon. I just don't think I went through the steps A to Z. So we're going to do that today with Chris's watermelon that I got from the market last weekend. You don't see it yet because I only want to pick it up once because it's heavy as a pig, I guess. Reminds me of the watermelons that used to be on my grandpa's farm, and they were heavy as well. Now Chris Stickpin, who used to be in this area and owned the shea butter, you guys probably know him more from the shea butter man. He used to have the shea butter business. I think they still do the shea butter. But he moved to North Carolina and wanted to become a farmer. I mean, he's straight up farmer. And he does organic farming, which is great because we don't have to do a whole lot of prep for the watermelon, because when we go through the watermelon, we're going to actually juice a part of the melon, the skin. And so you just, you know, if you got a regular watermelon and it's not organic, I mean, it's probably cool if you just rinse it off with a small amount of Clorox, you know, like a half a teaspoon to a gallon of water, and just let it sit in the sink like that. We're not going to use a lot of the core, but I just want you to see how large this watermelon is, and also for you to see that when you're purchasing a watermelon, you want to get one that has a significant amount of yellow space on the bottom. You can go in a lot of stores and you will see a watermelon that is just like this all the way around, and that means that watermelon is not ripe. So this means that it's been sitting there and it's starting to sweeten, and so that's a good thing. So that's the watermelon. They tell you can thump it like that and you'll hear like this, the difference in a good thumping. I forget what the difference is, but I'm always thumping the watermelon. You know, aren't we silly when we go to the store? And then the little tail-y thing there also is a good thing. So this is the watermelon. So we talk about the characteristics of foods. Red foods move the blood. Green foods clean the blood. The external part of the watermelon is green. That is one of the reasons that we're putting it in the blender with the rest of the watermelon, so that we can clean our blood. But predominantly the majority of this is red. It's going to be making sure that our blood is moving along pretty quickly. Now, the other big question, the million-dollar question is do we want to buy watermelons with seeds in them or not? Absolutely. And as children of God, whose entire religion is predicated upon the seed, we ought to be careful not to ever look at anything that is seedless, period. And for all you folks that have migrated to the Washington, D.C. area, that come from the South, you know better trying to eat some watermelon that doesn't have seeds in it. I'm in Wegmans sometimes. We used to be in there doing the demos for the popcorn. I ain't never seen so many black folks walking around with seedless watermelons. I said, your grandmother would spank your booty if she found out you was eating some seedless. What is a seedless watermelon? They just straight up think we crazy today. That's all. Some of the stuff that we do now is just daggone right sinful in terms of what we've fallen into. And then you ask the managers at a lot of these stores, do you have any seeded watermelons? Where is it? They talk about, well, folks don't like the seeds. They say they're getting away. And I'm like, you know, folks don't like the seeds. When did they decide to determine what's good and what's not good? It's just crazy. It's all out there. Just like the people in the church now telling the pastor what he ought to be doing. The sheep telling the shepherd, yeah, well, we think we ought to have fellowship hour with chicken wings instead of making them jokers eat salad at the church. So here's your watermelon with seeds. It's a large watermelon. Now, also when you open up a watermelon, when you slice it, you should really smell like that sweet kind of sense, you know, of something. And so I smell it. Now I got some peaches from Chris at the farmer's market, which were fabulous. A lot of you know that I got the green tomatoes and I fried them at his recommendation. Here are a few still left. I just took one and sliced it 5 times. Here's some turning red now. The cucumbers were fabulous as well. The peaches were absolutely juicy, mouth-watering. I know a lot of you are supposedly going to see him this weekend to get green tomatoes. You might want to text him. His information is in my thing so that he can save some for you. Because that's how I ended up getting those. They didn't have any red ones left. And he just had a few left and he let me have those. So you want to make sure that he has some while he's there. So that's... So when you do the watermelon, and when you do the watermelon, what you want to do is get a large watermelon. You're not going to find them that large in the supermarket. But you get a pretty decent size, and you juice half of it, and you chop up half. And then what you want to do over a day, 2-day period is eat as much watermelon as you can and drink as much watermelon as you can. So we've never actually gone through this. And so we talk about the red flesh of the watermelon really being able to move the blood around. And then the white pulp oxygenates the blood. So when you're slicing your watermelon, that's all you want to do is cut down so you get some parts of the pulp in there as well. And to show you just how easy this is. I mean, because before I say, did you see the video? Did you do your watermelon detox? They just kind of look at me like I have 16 heads. I'm like, it's watermelon season. In watermelon season, you want to do this probably once a week, at least just have a day, you know, that 1 day a week fast that you guys are supposed to be doing for at least 24 hours. You know, let it be your watermelon day fast. That way you don't feel like you're just really depriving yourself, because you can do the watermelon, drink as much as you can, and then if you just have to chew something or you feel like you're going crazy because you're not accustomed to fasting, then you have perfect permission to just go ahead and where's my adapter, and juice the thing, eat the watermelon. Hello, little guy, where are you? Love, 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 love. Live video. Here we are. Okay. So we're going to show you, typically, I've always told you guys that you want to blend. Get in the habit of blending, especially fruit juices, instead of juicing them. What is the difference between blending and juicing? Blending means that everything you see here is going into here and then eventually is going into me. When you juice, you're basically extracting the juice from the pulp. You want the pulp and the juice because the fiber is where? It's in the pulp. So that's the answer to that frequently asked question. And then look at watermelon. Watermelon has to be between 92 and 96% water. So even as you're slicing it, you'll have juice. Just kind of throw it in there. The whole thing becomes a wet mess. That's the only hard thing about that, and it's not hard. It's just that if you're trying to do live TV, it's difficult to stay clean looking. Now, when we're doing apple juice, pear juice, pineapple juice, whatever, we'll usually start with a tad bit of distilled or what do you call it? The other right water, purified water. Now with the watermelon, because it's 96% water, basically seconds to juice watermelon juice, because there's nothing to it. So then what you want to do is scoop out the rest of it. Now that you've got some liquid in there, take big chunks. You don't even have to really slice it up. Just keep filling it. Be careful because you don't want it to overflow, then it becomes messier than the mess that it can already be. Notice how I'm digging in and getting the white pulp. The more that white stuff you get, the better your detox period will be. It's not going to alter the taste. It's going to taste like sweet watermelon juice. If I was thinking, I would have gotten... And a lot of times I won't juice it too much longer than that, because I also kind of want to have a little bit of the fiber just kind of floating around so that I can roll it through my tongue and teeth when I'm drinking. Whenever you're drinking juice, you don't want to just like gush it down. You kind of want to swish it around in your mouth, so to speak, just to allow the enzymatic action to mix with your saliva and do a better healing job. And so I've kind of dug out some more, just the white pulp there. This is less than a third, a quarter of the watermelon. You want to blend it on medium. You want to blend it on medium or low. You don't want to blend on high unless you have to when I'm doing peppers and things like that. see it was just a couple of chunks in there, but not much. And if you don't want that, you can continue to blend. Now I have plenty of mint growing in the garden. Typically I'll have a handful of mint, just rinse it and put it into the blender as well. You can leave the liquid in there, but because it's watermelon juice and it's so easy to get it going in the blender, you can just go ahead and start emptying that. Look at that. So now you already have almost 2 quarts, and we still have half of a watermelon, 3/4, more than 3/4 of a watermelon left. I mean, a watermelon, I think I paid $9 for this watermelon. So at the end of the day, you're spending $9 versus whatever people pay for colon cleansing pills and all the rest of that crap that doesn't work nearly as well as what the watermelon is going to do for you. So I'm going to put this in here and show you the final piece of this with the rind in just a second. So now that we have that going, dump some of that water in there. Just going to already wipe this down a bit with a cloth. So now you just want to take a few pieces of the rind at a time, and you can slice it up a bit. You don't really have to. I have a blend tack, so it's pretty cool. It kind of does a lot. So take a few pieces. So now you've got big chunks of the white pulp, and you've got the green rind. So put a few in at a time. We'll throw some more watermelon in. Same thing, continuing to dig out, taking some of the white pulp in. And then we're going to let this blend up, and then we're going to start chopping up some and putting it into some containers so that we can eat and drink collectively over a 1 or 2 day period. If you are able notice when you put the rind in, you just let it run a couple of seconds longer, and same thing. It's not like it's really even thicker. It was a chunk kind of up in there. So now you've got almost 3 quarts. Keep doing the same thing. I mean, how simple can simple get? This is as simple as when Jesus said, "You are healed." And the funny thing is that if you do this, you know, people just sometimes they don't try things. Sometimes, you know, I love, somebody gave me some good information the other day about serving. So I have a tournament coming up this weekend, and I can serve when I'm not playing. Something's going on between my ears. I hate to admit that, but it is what it is. And this whole tournament thing is just funny. At least I can laugh about it. And so when we were serving, I said, I haven't hit with this person. She's been competing for 25 years, one of my friends. And she says, "Dr. Dallas, when you're not serving at 120 miles per hour and the serve actually goes in, there's nothing we can do with it. But you probably could also get some points when a person is standing there and the serve finally goes in because they used to every other ball." She had some jokes. And of course, it's not that inconsistent. But she was telling me, she says, "You practice your serve all the time. You take a ball out and serve out a whole basket. Nobody ever serves out a basket of balls." She said, "You do that all the time." She's like, "What are you doing when you're out there? You're just serving the balls, whatever." She says, "You have to say, okay, I'm going to get these 3 in a row in, or get 5 in a row." Then you have to actually practice the game. Like, okay, just you only have 2 serves, and after the first one doesn't go in, you have to tell yourself, second serve, got to get it in. You don't want to double fault. Then go over to the next side and act like you're playing a match. And I did that, so I played myself. So it was 6-3, 6-love. A girlfriend was, and the 6-3 was when I said I only get 1 serve. So I only got 1 serve. If I miss that, I miss the point. I go over to the next side. So then the second time, I would play with 2 balls. So I get 2 serves. So then I was like on fire. It was easily 6. And And I was like, all this time, did I not know that? Instead of serving out 1,000 balls, just really act like you're serving in a tournament, you know. And so I called her and I thanked her because I was like, you know, very seldom do people give me good information, any information that's useful. And so I was just thinking of all of this information that I'm always giving people that is extremely useful. If you want to get rid of your stomach, you want to drop a few pounds, then do this for 3 days. Really? So don't talk to me about anything about losing weight that you can't fit in your pants or your button won't buckle or whatever until you just try this. And then come back and thank me because this works. And you don't have to do it for 3 days. If you just drink as much watermelon juice as you can for a day and eat as much watermelon as you can for a day, you are going to be amazed at not just the water weight that goes away, but how your body is going to feel incredible. Some people, I think they just feel like I'm going to have knee pain for the rest of my life. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But if you do, I'm telling you, every summer, I probably get 100 watermelons. I'm probably doing watermelon juice 60, 70% of the summer. And at any given time in the winter, I got at least 20 bottles of frozen watermelon juice in the freezer because towards the end of the summer, I start getting paranoid when the watermelon season is dying and I start making enough watermelon juice to last me for the winter months. All right, so I am not going to bore you anymore showing you how to do this. I think it was boredom enough to show you this again after I did it 2 or 3 times last summer. Just because I needed to do, I'm always doing watermelon juice, so I was like, okay, let's turn the camera on and invite some people in. But then what you really honestly want to do is just take some containers. Now, with this big, huge watermelon, typically when I do large, I usually pick the larger watermelons in the stores. And when I go through it, I usually buy the watermelon, I come straight home and I do this. Now, as you can see, if I'm not talking, chatting, or whatever, I can get through a good-sized watermelon in about 15 minutes in terms of cutting it up, blending it up, pouring it in the bottles. And typically, I'll have at least 5 quart bottles and probably 6 containers. I usually use this big, giant container you guys saw online one day, and I fill that up with watermelon. And so if you have smaller containers or larger containers, if you have a family where you've got to share with a whole bunch of other people, then you might want to have more sliced watermelon because they just going to feel like they need to be chewing on something. And you just basically slice it and throw it into the container. You don't even need a cutting board. Just start cutting it up. And this is good because it's actually a little softer in the middle. And so this is some good watermelon. So I'm going to probably slice up more than this because I already actually have watermelon juice in the refrigerator. Humility and reverence, that is what we want to do when we take our requests to God, because He will answer us. He can heal us. He can provide the miracles and do the miracles. And then we want to cleanse our body. We want to take care of our spiritual health. We want to take care of our physical health. God wants us to be whole mentally, spiritually, and physically. As you see, as you are learning from what I'm taking you through in the chapter of Mark, Jesus was just as interested, if not more interested, in our physical being. Understanding that we can't be well, we can't be whole. He never asked the guy, do you want to be healthy? Do you want me to heal your body? He said, do you want to be made whole? Mentally, physically, and spiritually. And so that's what we want to focus on. We've got to start putting not more emphasis, but we just have to be more intentional about our physical health. We have to, people say they want to do this, they're going to do, well, what's the intent? Where's the plan? Here's the plan, go get the watermelon. This may look good, you may have sat there and listened, you may fast forward through, you may come back and visit us, whatever the case. But at the end of the day, it starts with going to get a watermelon. Whether you come to the farmer's market in College Park or on Campus Drive this weekend and get one of these great watermelons from North Carolina that are completely organic and sweet, or you go to Wegmans and get one, or you go to Glut and get one, I don't care, just at least get the watermelon. Get a knife. I know most people have a knife. And if you haven't already invested in a blender, just get a blender. You don't have to have a blend tack. Any blender, as you can see, this little, you can blend this up with your hand. You take It says watermelon. Watermelon. This is good watermelon. So, remember, see, I grew up in the summer on farms, and my grandpa had watermelons, hogs, pigs, and everything. We would sit in the field, look for a watermelon that had the yellow spot on the bottom, pick it up, and just bust it. Just drop it on the ground intentionally. And sit down, me and my 2 sisters and 2 brothers, because we had been picking black-eyed peas, lima beans, butter beans. My fingers used to stay purple when we had to peel the black-eyed peas and put them into bags, freezer bags, and folks in town would come by. We had fig trees, we had peach trees, we had apple trees, but when nothing funner. Is there not such a word? There was nothing as fun as busting open. My papa would let us, because we couldn't do it on our own. He would say, go get you a melon. We pick up that melon and drop that thing on the ground, and some of it would have some little bit of dirt and mud on it, the piece that got open, and we'd be just like the little pigs. Nothing, you know, nobody loves watermelon rind, the smart pigs. Then the pigs, they just be like, and that's how we see stuff everywhere. The best watermelons came out of Thomasville, Alabama. So anyway, see you in 2 weeks.